Welcome to There's Sometimes a Buggy, Irresponsible Opinions About Classic Film. I'm Elise.
I'm Dave, and this week we return to the Acteurist Oeuvre-view. It's part 3 of our series on Gloria Grahame. We're just about at the end of her MGM period. We've got Song of the Thin Man and Merton of the Movies, both from 1947. We'll delve into the wisdom of Leonard Maltin from his 1991 TV movies and video guide. If you know Maltin, you might know that these books refuse to give star ratings to movies in series, even a prestige series like The Thin Man.
And even the series as a whole doesn't get a rating?
Nope.
That just doesn't make any sense.
He just gives a block of text covering all 6 movies.
And people think our podcast doesn't make any sense.
It does make sense when you're dealing with a series with 40 entries. He does cover some of those. I think for The Thin Man, he could have given each one a star rating. However, he does tell us the final film of the series, Song of the Thin Man, had Nick and Nora frequenting many jazz hangouts, a la Peter Gunn, for some offbeat sequences. While the original Thin Man rated above its follow-ups, even the weakest entries were fresh and enjoyable, thanks mainly to the 2 stars. And a little aside here from Maltin, by the way, the Thin Man really wasn't William Powell. He was a character in the first film, played by Edward Ellis. He does give us some details on the film. The director, Edward Buzzell, and the cast list: William Powell, Myrna Loy, Keenan Wynn, Dean Stockwell, Gloria Grahame, and Patricia Morrison. Some important characters missing, including Leon Ames, who's in both of our movies this week. So this was your first time seeing Song of the Thin Man, Elise.
Yes, that's right.
And we have watched some Thin Man movies before, and we'll be covering them on the podcast, the first 2, as part of a Dashiell Hammett reading series for the holiday season in 2027.
Always before, when I've tried to watch a Thin Man movie, I have fallen asleep, a testament to how little the mystery genre resonates with me. Bores the living hell out of me, and this was certainly no exception, although somehow, I don't even know how, I managed to stay awake through it because I was exhausted on the day that we watched it.
Well, Thin Man movies do incorporate a real mystery that you can try to solve, but they're mostly devoted to highlighting the personalities of William Powell and Myrna Loy as Nick and Nora Charles.
Of course, that is what made this watchable. They're both very delightful, very comfortable with each other. I know that there are problems with earlier entries in the series where Nick is trying to get Nora out of the way of danger while he solves a mystery, but he's just given up on that now.
For the most part, he does try to dissuade her from making a one-woman commando raid on the insane asylum, but she goes anyway.
Right, and we know what's going to happen, and it does. The movie apparently needs to put the woman in danger for a few moments, and, then later puts the kid in danger for a few moments, but it's not really committed to anything that it does very strongly.
No, these are very formulaic films. Much as I enjoy them, I own the box set. The first 2 are the best, there's no question. But even those, they're a far cry from the intensely dark novel. It's true, Nick and Nora come from the book, and they do have the kind of banter that you see in the films, but everything surrounding them is so much more oppressively horrifying in the novel.
Well, yeah, I've even heard Nick and Nora spoken of in the same breath as screwball comedy.
If I could only take a few Powell and Loy films with me to a desert island, I don't think I would take any of the Thin Man movies. I would much prefer to see Libeled Lady, Love Crazy, I Love You Again, Double Wedding, all of those over the Thin Man movies.
For me, the best vignette in the whole movie, and the only time the movie capitalizes in any way on the fact that they now have a son that's old enough to be cast with a major child actor, Dean Stockwell, is the sequence where Nora tries to get Nick to behave like a normal, that is, violent and tyrannical father.
It's interesting. This is an extension mention of a little tug of war that's been going on between them since the beginning. The conceit of the novel and of the films is that Nick Charles was a police detective known for working some of the roughest parts of New York. He inevitably took on some of the characteristics of the criminals that he hunted. When he runs into society debutante, they fall in love, he marries her and decides he never is going to have to work again. That's what being rich means to him. And of course, there's a lot in the Hammett novel that comes straight from his Marxist political commitments. And even in the early films, I mean, he really does talk a lot about how, one of the most appealing things about Nora Charles is that she got him out of having to work. One of the little drawbacks to this arrangement, to their marriage, is that she kind of enjoys seeing him revert to his seamy origins whenever an opportunity presents itself.
We really see very little of that dynamic here.
No, instead we see Nora. Now, she does make a few comments about how she loves his friends, although she's a lot more emphatic about it in the earlier movies. Contrastingly, we see her really pushing their son in the direction of being a respectable member of the upper class. That's where all the trouble starts with this banking scene that you're alluding to, because little Nick Jr., all he wants to do is run outside of their penthouse apartment and play baseball in the streets with his roughneck friends. She wants him to practice his piano. He's got no time for that. He blatantly disobeys orders and tries to sneak out, and she does order Nick, the father, to take a newspaper to the son.
Yeah, I feel like the only subversive thing that happens in the whole movie is William Powell's total lack of interest in performing this role.
Well, it's a job, and he doesn't want any job. He definitely doesn't want to be the patriarch.
Yeah, but there seems to be tender motivations involved. He doesn't even seem to know how to begin. He says, I think this is how it goes.
And as he winds up to inflict the corporal punishment, he starts to project all these delightful memories of father-son moments onto his son's posterior.
Yeah. His son's bulging posterior, so that he and we are both aware, but he more than we at this point, of what the punchline is going to be. He finally manages to come up with a memory of himself goofing off and still totally failing to be a patriarch, and Dean Stockwell laughing at him, and that allows him to unleash holy hell with a newspaper. But afterwards it is revealed that Dean Stockwell had a protective baseball glove in his pants the whole time, and Nick was probably aware of this. Retrospectively, one did notice something odd was going on there with the backside.
Nick can detect an antique weapon on the person of a party guest just by brushing up against him.
Is that an 18th century pistol, or are you happy to see me?
So he can definitely tell when someone's got a glove on his ass.
For the most part, with mysteries that don't have Myrna Loy and William Powell in them, movie mysteries of this era, the make or break it aspect of them, for me at least, since I don't give a shit about mysteries, is how interesting is the milieu that the mystery leads us into? How interesting are the individual eccentric characters, directly or indirectly part of it? And I guess the most recent example of that I can think of for the podcast was when we covered The Big Clock, also based on a novel and was very successful in that respect. This one really isn't. It should. The high life and the low life aspect that the 30s and 40s mysteries of studio era Hollywood, they all cover that territory and are all interesting for the way they blend together. But this is the blandest blending of that kind I've seen in a long time. Even the jazz bands, although they do undeniably still sound good and interesting to me in this moment of transition from big band to beatnik, but even the jazz bands are all white. One white jazz band after another, after another, after another.
That's our setting for this film, jazz nightlife. We start out on a boat, a gambling ship, where there's a semi-hep big band playing, but the members of that band are more interested in the subculture, the real jazz subculture that is taking place in jam session areas, like real dive bars or penthouse apartments like Leon Ames's.
But I did find myself wondering while I was watching whether that would actually be the case, particularly in the penthouse settings, if the bands would be segregated or not.
I don't think so at this time. Interesting stuff that white musicians would have been involved in would have been collaborations with black musicians in the jazz world. And we We don't see any of that. Well, this is MGM. They're not likely to get too involved in a truthful depiction of American subcultures. All we really get is the jive talk, and that has to stand in for all of the otherness that Middle America would have projected upon the jazz world.
There are a lot of cute jokes as a result of that, but Nick and Nora are hopelessly square.
Oh yeah, to that extent he has become a respectable figure, I suppose, because he can't engage anymore.
More so than Nora, who actually picks up some of the lingo. They've definitely acquired a lot of the new respectability of MGM in their late family life.
Yeah, well, this is how Mayer liked things. And they still drink, like just about everyone in America at that time. They seem to have left behind the insanely hard drinking that was such a staple of the first couple of films. That just does not fit in with Louis B. Mayer's vision of a nuclear family.
And neither does Gloria Grahame, but I thought that her lip-syncing performance at the beginning of this movie, which barely gives her anything to do, the only thing that gives this movie any noir atmosphere at all is her few moments on the screen, not as a dead body.
Yeah, she's in a really tough situation, and she plays it that way. So you're right. Gloria Grahame brings a little bit of gravitas to a movie that is deeply lacking in it. We find out fairly quickly. The movie opens with her. She's singing in this big band combo on a gambling ship off the coast. She goes through several facial contortions.
I was absolutely struck by this performance, especially considering she's not actually singing. She is putting a lot more into the performance than most lip-sync acting jobs, particularly if you're not the star of the picture. I mean, I guess you could think of Rita Hayworth in Gilda, for example, is doing quite an amazing lip-sync acting job, but she's got the whole picture to play with that characterization. So I was really struck by how much, more than she needs to, Gloria Grahame is putting into these tiny performances. And considering how little we get to know about her characters, that gives some sense of enigma to them. In these few seconds of lip-syncing, she just told a whole story to me, beginning with pouty petulance, then going for the bulk of the song through real psychological torment, and then ending up the moment the song ends, abruptly with a cold, closed-off expression. So every single noir emotion that you might want a character to have, she goes through in the course of this tiny sequence.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, and we find out why she might be going through the gamut of emotions here. This is a band in turmoil. Virtuoso clarinetist Buddy Hollis has hit the skids, half crocked or basically fully crocked on stage while they're trying to perform a song that was written for her to sing.
I mean, this should be nightmarish noir territory, that this clarinetist actually goes mad. It's actually mad from the first moment that we see him, but the performance is a bit silly.
It's not being presented with the pathos that it certainly could have. Gloria Grahame is the only one giving it the pathos. We get some commentary from his bandmates. It's like, yeah, he's really off tonight, man. And we find out, yes, he was involved in a relationship with Gloria Grahame, but she threw him over for the band leader, one of the most unsavory people I've ever seen in a film, played by Philip Reed. That has just gone nowhere, and we see them breaking up after the end of the song. She's unhappy with him, and he's already moved on to other women. She threw over this wonderful, supposedly wonderful clarinetist for nothing.
Very, very mentally fragile.
Yeah, she's destroyed his mind, and she didn't even get a real new relationship out of it. So she's disgusted with herself, disgusted with the whole scenario.
It is very unfortunate that this does not lead her to become a suspect, as you would expect from the fact that she opens and this scenario opens the movie. Her character does have a lot to do, but all of it takes place off screen.
Right, well, that kind of preserves her as a possible suspect. We don't know what she's up to behind the scenes.
Until she turns up as a dead body.
So the person who's going to die to start the whole thing rolling is this disgusting band leader. Everyone that we meet on the boat seems to have a reason to kill him, except for Nick and Nora. You've got pretty much the whole band. They hate him, especially the maniacal Buddy, although he doesn't seem capable of taking any kind of intentional action any longer. The owner of this gambling boat, who does not have a great reputation, has been having some cross words with the bandleader over money. We've got Jane Meadows, pretty good role, a larger role than Gloria Grahame in the movie, as a society woman who's engaged to the gambler against her father's will. You've got her father, Ralph Morgan, the antique gun collector, who seems pretty nutso himself.
Jane Meadows is in the role of the person that I think we most often suspect, the woman who could turn out to be the femme fatale or innocent. But again, it's really bait and switch, because why open the movie with Gloria Grahame's singer? Like, the only reason seems to be to give this movie some kind of noir flavor that it doesn't sustain.
Yeah, I don't think you can call this a noir.
Yeah, but the mystery plays with those elements.
Yeah, it gestures toward noir.
It's 1947, so what's MGM doing for noirs in the late 40s?
Well, we've seen some. They're making some good ones. Lady in the Lake, one of my very favorites, is an MGM film. Obviously a very idiosyncratic Robert Montgomery one-man band production. Nevertheless, put out by MGM. There's High Wall, which we really liked when we saw it. Yeah, late 40s MGM can definitely do noir, but they don't want to do it with the Thin Man series.
And they don't want to do it with Gloria Grahame.
Yeah, only for those few minutes that she sings the song and then complains about the hell that her life has fallen into. Then, yeah, the rest of the movie kind of backs away from all of that. It's mostly about Nick and Nora getting in and out of scrapes and learning about jive talk.
Yeah, pretty much. Which is tame, even by their standards.
The mystery winds up hinging on the various womanizing activities of bandleader Philip Reed. We won't give away the murderer because I don't think it's necessary in this review of Gloria Grahame's career. We are going to move right on to Merton of the movies. We'll hear what Leonard Maltin had to say about that one. He gives it 2 stars out of a possible 4. Lifeless remake of George S. Kaufman, Mark Connolly play, filmed before in 1924 and 1932, about a movie-struck simpleton's adventures in Hollywood. A real disappointment. Choreographer Robert Alton's directing debut, and the cast list: Red Skelton, Virginia O'Brien, Gloria Grahame, Leon Ames, Alan Mowbray, and Hugo Haas.
Song of the Thin Man didn't do well at the box office, and this really tanked. I don't think it helped that apparently most of it was reshot after unsuccessful previews, so it became very expensive.
I surprised myself by loving this movie.
I liked it. We were very worried about Red Skelton. I mean, he just doesn't seem like the sort of thing that we would enjoy because we're snobs, unless already previously exposed to a particular lowbrow comedian or middlebrow comedian. We are, as a rule, snobs until proved otherwise. We had a previous bad experience with Red Skelton, doing some of his vaudeville routines in the Ginger Rogers movie Having a Wonderful Time. That donut dunking skit, though, which is what made him famous and was co-written by his wife, that was okay.
Red Skelton has been in movies that I really like 3 Little Words.
You also didn't like him in Having a Wonderful Time, though.
No, definitely not. I've never actually seen one of the movies that is built entirely around Red Skelton, I guess, until this one, if you want to call it that. But he's playing a slightly different character from his usual outsized buffoon.
For one thing, he's acting. He's being very low-key. I don't know if he was more buffoonish in the first version and it didn't go over well. I have no idea how this all came together, but he's very, very subdued.
There's some real pathos in this movie.
Well, this is the thing, because I was reading about him and his comedy theory. By the way, did you know that in his later years, he started selling the paintings of clowns?
Yes.
That he did obsessively.
Yes.
As a hobby, and apparently made at least as much money from that as for his work in entertainment.
Strange career.
But he loved the figure of the clown, and he does talk about how important pathos is. And so, I don't know if we have the wrong idea about Red Skelton, if he incorporated pathos into his performances more regularly than we thought. He certainly wasn't doing it in Having a Wonderful Time, though.
No.
But he clearly knows how to do it based on this. Also of interest, of course, is the story, which is as influential a story about Hollywood as A Star is Born, the various versions of A Star is Born. Although this story of Hollywood wasn't made originally by Hollywood, because it was based on a novel that Gertrude Stein had some positive, although possibly also ironic things to say about. That's why you heard me laughing out loud, Dave.
Gertrude Stein was a fan.
Maybe, but she had some possibly ironic positive quotes about the novel. For example, the best book about 20th century American youth. But that's not the one that made me laugh. The one that made me laugh, I don't know if some of these are apocryphal or if they were all part of some review she wrote of it. Didn't know Gertrude Stein was writing reviews. Here, I'll give you the one that made me laugh. The best description of America that has ever been done. So I wrote a whole essay on the novel, which was by Harry Leon Wilson, who also wrote Ruggles of Redcap, something I know nothing about except that I've heard the title. So this was in the LA Review of Books by Charles Musser, and it goes deeply into Hollywood-related numerology and doubling. Worth a read, but I didn't need to read this essay to know how influential this story was. Obviously, the idea of turning a serious silent drama into a comedy is used again, as well as exposing how vile the big Hollywood stars can be, and the whole plot of a plucky, talented innocent getting their break. It's all reused in Singin' in the Rain. The Merton story is also used as a frame for Jerry Lewis's The Errand Boy, in which he's called Morty. So the idea of a comedian who is in real life a misfit, in real life a laughingstock, and this somehow revealing real talent as a comedian. As I was reading about Red Skelton in his Wikipedia entry, which is very extensive, there are many anecdotes of such things happening to him, of him trying to be a serious actor and screwing up and the audience finding it hilarious. Now, are these the kinds of legends that accrue to comedians the way, particular types of stories accrue to religious figures? Or were these stories cooked up by his publicity team? Or did these things really happen? I don't know, but it's all part of the legend of Hollywood.
This idea of someone who's not in on the strategy being employed by the director, I mean, you see that all the time. That's what people say Paul Verhoeven is doing sometimes when he casts soap opera actors. There's a lineage between Merton of the movies and a film like Bowfinger from the 90s, where Steve Martin is a down-on-his-luck director who's trying to make a film starring an action hero played by Eddie Murphy, and of course he can't get him, so he gets his ridiculous twin to do some scenes. And that's kind of what's happening here, because they keep telling poor Merton that his screw-ups are going to be outtakes, but actually they're the whole purpose of the film, and those are going to be what make comedy gold.
The setup here was potentially really, really devastating, and it's not used for that. It's not ultimately the punch is really pulled. And I don't know, what did you think? The pulling of the punch was effective or cowardly?
Well, I think you could say it's both, because it manages, yes, it's cowardly, because nobody wants this movie to end with Merton killing himself. It's also kind of genius because, and I guess maybe this is part of the original story, I have no idea. It seems altered from the original property. That's my sense.
Oh yeah, a lot of things are altered, yes.
Coming to realize that he is a clown, I mean, it's an amazing moment of self-discovery. And this is part of the reason that Virginia O'Brien loves him as well. It all comes together for Merton. And will he accept it, or will he continue to wallow in his old illusions about himself? And he manages to embrace reality by being a complete goofball.
I think that part may not be altered.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm not sure though. I mean, it seems like it might be worth reading.
Well, if Gertrude Stein likes it. One of the fascinating things about this movie is that while acting in it in a secondary role, Gloria Grahame may have glimpsed something of what her future could have held if she had stuck with MGM, because Virginia O'Brien in this movie gets her one and only starring role after years of appearing in small parts and specialty oddball features.
You know that for a fact, that this was her only starring role?
Yeah, because I love Virginia O'Brien.
Oh, she's wonderful in this movie. Did you know that there's a meta aspect to her role in this movie, which is that she was a serious singer?
Yes.
Right, the legend that accrues to her is that she was a serious singer, but during one of her early performances she got stage fright, and the audience thought it was so hilarious that she was singing these dramatic songs with a frozen face that she made it part of her shtick and became a comedian.
Yeah, she was very successful with that, but obviously that's kind of a career-limiting move as well. In MGM, she's in all kinds of important musicals throughout the 40s, but always off to the side, and often you only see her in this musical number where she sings a deadpan ballad.
She's got to sell that she is in love with this man-child. She is a wholly good and wholesome person, despite the fact that she's involved in doing something that could completely destroy this man's mind, the way Gloria Grahame destroyed Buddy Hollis's mind.
It's true, although she's faced with a pretty difficult choice because he's reduced to living in the park, and who knows how much longer he was going to continue living anyway if she hadn't gotten him this part.
One of the things from the novel that has changed that would have been way more evocative than what we see here is that when Merton goes on the skids in the novel, he starts sleeping on the sets.
Oh, really?
In the studios.
Well, we do see him sneaking onto some sets. He does have that amazing scene where he fakes out the guard at the gate. He's not completely stupid, this Merton.
Well, yeah, you're right. For one thing, the point is not that he's an idiot necessarily, but that he is stuck on a wrong idea about himself. That's really a wrong idea about art, right? And yeah, that he just has, he is an innocent who has illusions about Hollywood, illusions about the movies, illusions in general. Even something like the Purple Rose of Cairo.
Well, yeah, he's very much like the Mia Farrow character in Purple Rose of Cairo.
You can see the influence of this story on so many movies about Hollywood. And he uses his ingenuity in that case in order to get onto the set to be a fan, right?
Yeah, he wants to see Gloria Grahame's character do her own stunts.
So that's important enough to him for him to figure this out. So again, that's another maybe misapplication of his energy. He believes that he wants to be an artiste, which means that he misunderstands his own talent, but also he misunderstands his own current drive, which is to be a fan. And that's also why he's in this
abusive relationship with Leon Ames.
Yeah, there's this imagining himself as this protege of Leon Ames, because he's a huge fan of Leon Ames as well.
Leon Ames is hilarious in this movie, too. Very underrated actor. We see him in only a couple of scenes in Song of the Thin Man, and he doesn't do a whole lot. In this one, he makes an impression. I mean, he has quite a trajectory.
Yeah, he really underplays the role of dissipated jerk movie star. He doesn't have to give it anything more than it just being what it is. This guy is not evil. He's completely a victim of... In Singing in the Rain, Gene Hagen is really presented as a villain, as a scapegoat for the audience's hatred. But here you can really believe that these stars are just victims of their circumstances. And not even Gloria Grahame, really. We have to consider her character separately. She's almost an innocent, too.
Yeah.
Leon Ames is just a star who is a victim of his own stardom. Anyone else in his position in Hollywood would act the same way that he does. It's not like he's got some kind of unique character flaw.
No, he just is sleepwalking through his career, and he's sleepwalking through these scenes where he's supposed to be welcoming his protege to Hollywood. He can't be bothered to muster up anything, even a facsimile of enthusiasm. He's surrounded by all these criminal press agent guys.
He's sleepwalking through his bender.
That too. And then when he shows up 2 weeks later with that heavy beard... like, okay, let's go to work. It's really funny. There's so many incidental wonders in this film. I was really impressed. And to have enjoyed Virginia O'Brien so much in all those MGM movies that I've seen through the years, and not to have really known about this movie, not to have known that she was, the female lead of a film.
She's got so many emotional tones in this movie. Like, Red Skelton is just playing an innocent figure of pathos. That's all he's doing. He's doing it very well. You get behind him. You feel for him. It's great. Virginia O'Brien, on the other hand, has so many different things going on tonally. She's wholesome and lovely, but she's also wise to the world. She puts a kind of shield between her irony and Skelton. Like, she translates her wisdom about the world, her world weariness, in a way that's very gentle.
Yeah, the way their early scenes stack up, I feel like they evoke Sullivan's Travels, right? Like the Veronica Lake scene, except that in this movie, the reality is pretty close to the way Veronica Lake thinks things are in Sullivan's Travels when she meets this down-and-out guy. And then she gets the rug pulled out from under her when she finds out that he's a famous director masquerading as a hobo, and she throws him in the pool. In this one, she meets a kind of lovable goofball, and he really is a lovable goofball, and she tries to help him in Hollywood.
Yeah, well, of course, the novel predates
Yeah, of course.
Sullivan's Travels, so that gender-reversed helping out of this would-be actor on the skids could have been influenced by this or by the Kaufman and Connolly stage adaptation, which was a big hit.
Yeah, it's definitely a property to investigate. Maybe read the novel, maybe have a book club episode on this with even the other films if we can find them.
Yeah, the other film adaptation. We should walk through this one a little bit more, and then we can get into Gloria Grahame's character.
So there are opportunities for Red Skelton to be a goofball in this movie. The main set piece there is his failure. Well, he's a failure at the movie theater, but that kind of all breaks in a miraculous way for him and gets him to Hollywood when he is doing his evening job at the Gentleman's Club in the over 70 room. I mean, that's where the movie gets a lot of mileage out of his slapstick clown abilities.
Right, and I'm sure you appreciated some of the movie's social commentary in this sequence. When he goes to this ancient man who's been sitting in a chair at his club for so long that he's developed cobwebs and tells him that his house is on fire, and the man asks which one.
Yeah.
And then can barely get out of his chair and spends the entire rest of the scene shuffling with tiny steps across the room.
Before he emerges from his cobwebs, he's like, get me up! That's the best line reading in that whole scene. And then, as all this chaos ensues, this old man is struggling to get from one end of the room to the other. Red Skelton destroys the entire chandelier.
Well, he doesn't destroy the chandelier. He's got the bulbs. He has to replace the bulbs. Apparently, the men are... I guess the men never leave, so there's no time to do this when they're not there.
No, it basically winds up being a bunch of firecrackers landing on the ground.
And, of course, everyone knows that it's going to happen. It's as inevitable as the bottle breaking in a Hitchcock suspense scene. I like the beat of the other employee catching the first one that falls.
Yeah, maybe disaster can be averted, but no, Merton.
Like, they're ready for that. They anticipate that level of incompetency, human error, bad luck, whatever, but not
dropping all of them.
Yeah, that's only something that Merton can do.
So he gets fired, but that too is fortuitous because that gives him an opportunity to go to the set where they're filming at night and sneak on, and he does his commando raid, and he gets to see that Gloria Grahame does not do her own stunts, despite what she's been telling the press.
Right, and that's how Virginia O'Brien set all of this up.
She needed him to see for himself that all is not what it seems.
Yeah, so she's slowly starting his disillusionment.
And she's not doing it for devilish reasons. She doesn't like to pluck the wings off of flies. She actually likes this guy, and she thinks that he needs to toughen up a little bit, soften up some of that idealism before he gets himself in real trouble.
Yeah, I think she wants him to realize that this is never going to happen. She wants him to realize he needs to go home.
He's been hanging on because of these completely false promises that were made to him just as a publicity stunt by Leon Ames, who's completely forgotten him, and she wants him to understand either he goes home or he starts to think in a more realistic way about Hollywood.
Well, what we see is that she's been struggling for a very long time and having to do this degrading and dangerous stunt work.
And nobody cares about her.
But the only way that she actually manages to get her break is early on she tells him that she's got a relative in the business.
Well, he's an old family friend.
That's right. So no one is just coming out of Hicksville, coming out of the Midwest, and breaking into the movies. You're either going to have been talent scouted from the stage or vaudeville, or you know somebody.
Yeah, and even if you know somebody, you still have to do backbreaking stunt work for several years before a part opens up where you can actually be a credited cast member.
Or I don't know what Gloria Grahame's character is supposed to have done. Casting couch?
We can speculate.
I feel like she hasn't been culled from the stage.
Probably not. The camera just loves her.
Yeah, we'll say that.
She loves the camera. She loves everyone. She's not presented in a villainous way either, even though she is part of a scheme scheme to keep Merton in the dark about how he's being deployed in this drama-turned-comedy.
Yeah, but Virginia O'Brien can't object to that because she is the architect of this whole plot.
No, but when she realizes how they're going to go about distracting him, she just goes and gets him.
Sure, but having sex with Gloria Grahame is for some reason... So this is what's interesting.
His virtue is in danger.
Sure, his virtue is in danger, and I guess we have to take that seriously as if he's like a Dale Cooper who doesn't know how to sexually defend himself because he doesn't know about alcohol. But at the same time also, Gloria Grahame's character, Virginia O'Brien, reacts to her like she's some kind of Spider-Woman, but that's not how Gloria Grahame is playing this character. She's not unpleasant the way Lena Lamont is.
No, she actually likes Red Skelton. She's not snickering, oh, this hick idiot, I'll pretend to like him. No, she's like, yeah, I'd love to take that guy home.
Well, she likes all the boys, just like in It's a Wonderful Life.
Right.
Obviously, she will sleep with any man. She's a nymphomaniac.
Yeah, but she's doing it in a fun way. She makes it seem fun.
Yeah, she's sweet. Like I said, she seems just as much of an innocent as he is.
Yeah, she does get him drunk and break down his inhibitions, and that's by design. But still, she thinks he'll enjoy the end result.
She doesn't play any of these moments as nefarious or designing or manipulative. I guess that's my point. I guess it could have been played in a different way.
Yeah, exactly. The same words and the same actions could have been so much more vicious. It is a wonderful turn for Gloria Grahame, and we've been bad-mouthing the way MGM has used her. Actually, this is quite a unique turn, and I guess it calls back a little bit to Blonde Fever as well.
Well, the only thing I would object to about it is that her character isn't given more to do, that her character isn't given more of a role to play here.
Well, that goes without saying. We've been very down on MGM for not letting her star in anything.
Because I think this character is he's supposed to be completely obsessed with her, and I think a lot of that has been transferred onto Leon Ames, compared to, say, another movie influenced by this property, Hollywood or Bust, a Martin and Lewis Tashlin movie, in which Jerry Lewis is obsessed with Anita Ekberg, and that's the reason he wants to go to Hollywood.
Well, that's a reason. But I really do want to redouble the point that both of us, I think, have been making, that even though she's known as a bad girl of noir, that's the kind of prevailing characteristic, this fun-loving, freewheeling sexuality that she's also able to project in a non-sinister way.
Yeah, I was thinking that the way she plays this character really draws on the portrayal in It's a Wonderful Life, but in that movie, the character is intentionally written that way. But here, you could go in a different direction with Beulah Baxter, but Gloria Grahame is again playing her as though you can be an innocent nymphomaniac, as though you can just really like to sleep with all of the men, and that's okay. It's just something she does.
The movie's also very clear that she wouldn't ultimately be good for Red Skelton, and you want him to wind up with Virginia O'Brien. Against all odds, it's actually a pretty affecting love story between Red Skelton and Virginia O'Brien, and Gloria Grahame is getting in the way of that to some extent, so you want something to prevent it from going too far.
Well, all she wants from him is sex, so
Yeah.
that's the reason that this isn't going to work out. Obviously, he would like to have a love bond. The scene where Virginia O'Brien is trying to get him to kiss her romantically is pretty funny.
There are 30 kisses illustrated in this book that he got for showing up for class, basically, and paying all of his dramatic correspondence school fees.
And she just keeps saying, any of them. Just do any of them.
Number 1 is a peck on the cheek, and she's like, okay, let's go to number 30. She's definitely urging him to get to the most romantic kiss. And he actually does lay a good romantic kiss on her at the end, and then we find out that he's mostly trying to prepare for his big scene in the movie, which never even happens.
Yeah, his big scene with Gloria Grahame.
The kiss doesn't happen because the director is subtly encouraging it in a more ludicrous direction. This unashamed, positive portrayal of sexuality in a world that is very much focused on shaming women's sexual agency is going to be used in interesting ways throughout the rest of her career. Sometimes that characteristic is not going to be at the forefront, but next time when we do A Woman's Secret, there's definitely going to be some of that, although it's going to be twisted in a subtly, or maybe more than subtly, sinister direction.
This is the kind of thing that I guess could get past the censors. That you could look at it and project your own dirty feelings onto it, if you see what I mean, right? There's nothing you can grasp and say that she is, and point to and say that she is definitely advocating being a nymphomaniac, right? It's just the way she plays it, and you're either going to see it that way or you're not.
But she makes it look pretty good, and everyone likes her,
Well, Virginia O'Brien doesn't like her very much.
She doesn't hate her, though, and the crew likes her, and nobody's making disparaging remarks about her. No one's slut-shaming her.
Virginia O'Brien totally slut-shames her when she comes and rescues Red Skelton from her.
Yeah, but that's mainly because they're competing for him romantically, as crazy as that sounds.
True, but slut-shaming does occur at that moment.
Okay, but it's just coming from her, and there's no comeuppance for Gloria Grahame. She's going to continue on her merry way through her career.
Oh yeah, this is not any kind of harm to her.
No, she's like, okay, well, Red Skelton's leaving now.
She's like, I'll move on to the next guy.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. She didn't have her heart set on him, but she liked him. He's a cute guy. He's a cute weirdo.
What do you feel like this story ultimately has to say about Hollywood? I mean, it has a place for him.
You can find a link here between Sullivan's Travels and Merton of the movies, right? Again, probably something to look at. Did Preston Sturges have a relationship with this original property?
Obviously, there's also the play, and Preston Sturges was a playwright. He would have been pretty young, but not that young when the play was a hit in his early 20s.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about. Did he have a relationship with this property as a novel, as a play, as a film from the 1930s?
But we brought up Preston Sturges, we brought up Jerry Lewis, we brought up Singing in the Rain, probably the most famous Hollywood movie about Hollywood ever made.
Bowfinger.
Eddie Murphy, we brought up Eddie Murphy, so that's quite a lineage.
Well, I mean, what this movie seems to be saying, it's definitely arguing for a wholehearted embrace of comedy, as opposed to straining for seriousness. Of course, the movie doesn't exactly play fair, because the serious movie that we're shown is Leon Ames running around in a Sherlock Holmes outfit. That's what it was before it was a comedy. It doesn't exactly look like high drama.
And I wonder if that was influenced by the series that Red Skelton made in the early 1940s, where he played an inept radio detective, or a detective on the radio who is an amateur detective on the side, I think. The Fox.
All I'm saying is that in Preston Sturges, we've got Joel McCrea trying to make a movie about capital and labor clashing, and that's straining for seriousness. We also get some very intense dramatizations of life on the outs in America in that film. It embraces far more of the gamut of emotions than this one does, but within its limited scope, it really achieves wonders. I loved it.
Yeah, I think the original novel leaned a lot harder into the portrayal of down and out in America.
So it was more like a proto Day of the Locust.
Yeah, or the novel that this LA Review of Books writer brings up. They shoot horses, don't they?
Next week on the podcast, our special subject for June. In the final part of our Pharaoh vs. Allen series, we'll be discussing Alice, Shadows and Fog, and Husbands and Wives, which brought down the partnership with a bang. We'll see you then.